you might be building your project or building your scope around the actual application of ignition. All right. But if you find that you now spend an additional 20% of your time just futzing with communications with the IT staff or trying to build your own network, maybe you're trying to manually configure some of those self-made IT devices, that's really going to sap time and resources out of your project and erode some margins. With Tosibox, we have the ability to apply this automation to create these networks to really minimize that engagement. All right. So what I've done is I've powered on this lock. I've got an internet connection. All right. I've added a couple devices to it, one directly and one through a managed switch. And we're actually going to come back to these guys here in a minute. Okay. That lock here actually happens to be this NetLab Pump Station 41. It got added to my list since I serialized it with the key. So we'll come back here in a minute. I did tell my key to go ahead and connect to my infrastructure lock. All right, that's the virtual central lock up in New Jersey. And I'm just going to show you how simple it is to get to your ignition server, just remotely, just a simple remote access. I'm connected to that data center lock. Here's my ignition server, a simple right-click remote desktop. Okay, takes me right to the login screen for Windows Remote Desktop, except all my crazy certificate stuff, and boom, I'm in my server. I didn't have to open TeamViewer. I didn't have to have a log me in session. I don't have to pay those expensive subscriptions. A lot of you are already deploying ignition on, and here's my ignition gateway. A lot of you are already deploying ignition on these Windows machines that already has Windows Remote Desktop. It's free. What you're missing is the secure way to get to it. So very simply, I plug my key in, put in my password, connect to the lock that has my ignition server behind it, right click, run remote desktop, and I'm in. Okay, no special IT requirements. I didn't have to open ports on a firewall to allow remote desktop in, nothing crazy like that. And I'm not traversing a screen share program through the screen share provider's cloud. All right, that's key when you're supporting your customers and saying, hey, I'm going to come in and do integration work. Will you come in directly with Tosibox, or are you actually bouncing off the TeamViewer cloud and back down? Okay, so simple, easy remote desktop. All right, I'm going to minimize that. We'll come back here in a second. As I mentioned, everyone, I went ahead and adopted this lock into my network. I had this lock already established. So I've got some Siemens automation here, and I have a pump station here. Okay, and I can go ahead and connect to both of these. All right, and you'll notice that they actually are different networks. I believe this is the Siemens one is a 10.10.10 network, and this is a 10.87 or something like that on it as well, through which I have a number of devices connected. All right. Now, while those are loading up, let me show you a couple topologies here. And Bill, I believe you're going to throw this diagram that I put together on the handout section while I'm chatting here. So be on the lookout for this as an attachment in the GoToWebinar app. But what I did here in the simple remote access is I used remote desktop, okay, to gain access into ignition, right? Here in this operational infrastructure, the second one, I can create a very simple operational network between a few devices. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have a master lift station, okay, that's in a suburb, and that master lift station has 4 or 5 subordinate lift stations behind it. Obviously a wastewater application, okay? You could actually create a unified layer 2 network. By layer 2, that means all of the lift stations are on the exact same IP range. You could create a unified layer 2 network between the master lift station and those 4 or 5 subordinate lift stations and interconnect them such that an ignition edge application or even a full-blown ignition setup at that master lift station can communicate to all of those OT devices. All right. And to do that, if I want to interconnect a couple locks together, and close out my data center lock here. If I want to grab this NetLab pump station lock and make it part of my Siemens lock, I can very simply go to Devices, Connect Locks, grab these two. I'm going to let my Siemens lock be the main lock and let my pump station lock be the sub lock. Next, save and finish. Okay, and that's it. I have now told this lock to be an extension of that network. Okay, and now when this pump station 41 lock drops underneath the Siemens automation lock, it's creating its own layer 2 tunnel between, which means that a device on this network on this top station, maybe running ignition edge, is able to communicate to the devices on that lock. These could be on other sides of town. These could be on other sides of the country. These could even be on other sides of the planet. Same IP scheme, running your ignition application across a simple point-to-point secured network. Okay, so when you look at this picture about Tosibox operational infrastructure, here are your layer 2 components on your lock-to-lock. Everything here is in the same IP range. Simple, easy, secure. All right. Now, let's start getting into the fun part. Bill, do we have any questions or anything you need to add at this moment?
Let's keep moving forward.
Okay, bud. All right, so let's get into the big guy here. Tosibox operational and data infrastructure. Okay. This is what we mainly think of when we're talking about big time SCADA or these larger applications that you're building with ignition. You've got a combination of devices out in the field, multiple systems, multiple networks, maybe multiple processes, all coming back to a central location. All right, that's what I have up here in the data center. And what I need to do is I actually want to connect ignition up to my Siemens PLC, right? I want to be able to pull data right out of that Siemens PLC with my ignition gateway, all right? So we're gonna take this gateway through the VCL, all right, through this layer 3 connection of this lock and grab access to that PLC, all right? So let's go ahead and set that up. What I'm gonna do here is go to Devices, Connect Locks. I'm gonna grab my data center lock and my Siemens lock. Hit Next. We're gonna use layer 3 because maybe we're gonna send OPC UA data or something like that. Next, save and finish. And upon doing so, what I've done is I've now added that Siemens lock directly to my ignition system. Okay, I've added this operational network through a point-to-point layer 3 connection up to New Jersey. Now this lock shows red right here on my screen for the moment. Give it about 15, 30 seconds. Well, it's actually already done it. It's going to turn green, and it confirms that now that lock has created its own point-to-point network directly to that data center. So dropping back to my screen here, I've just created this network. No static IP addresses required, no tricky IT configurations or having to grab my network engineer or buy an expensive gear. Y'all saw me do that with 2 checkboxes, a radio button and a save, and I've just created the hardest network in this overall topology. Now,
Sure.
Go ahead, Bill.
So this is a time to remind everyone that picture that you've got there, that finally tools are available for the system integrator community to have those, say, Cisco style networks, traditional useful IT networks at a scale, cost, and complexity that matches what the market is demanding from you today. That's what we want you to connect today.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. So with that automation, we've solved the hardest piece in this whole connectivity problem. Now, it's just a matter of configuring our ignition to work with this PLC. Okay, so I'm going to jump in here. I need to move my GoToMeeting out of the way. Log into my virtual central lock. Here's my ignition access group. I'm going to move my Siemens system over here. Okay, and it's in with the IP address of my ignition server, and go ahead and hit save. All right, now I can pop up here. Okay, and you can see here that my NetLab S7 1200 is now already connected. I had already built this IP address right down to there. Before I had hit those two check boxes, the radio button save, that status was disconnected. I didn't have a connection between my data center and there. Once I connected the two locks, dropped that lock into the access group, now my ignition gateway server can talk directly to that PLC. Now I can pull out the tags, create all my pretty pictures, do my nice trends, get my information, informatics out, all that stuff, all within a few clicks. And here's what's important, guys. I'll reiterate this. I didn't have to call my network engineer. I didn't have to buy expensive gear. I didn't have to submit a support ticket and wait, 2-3 weeks for all this to be configured to create this infrastructure. Simple, point-to-point, multi-factor authenticated infrastructure for any ignition application of any size and any scale.
Mm-hmm.